Hey, this is Mike from Proactive, and you're listening to the Building Byte podcast. Tune in as we spotlight our guest, Josh Levy, co-founder and CEO at Document Crunch. Our episode is focused on contracts and empowering everyone in the industry to understand them. For more information on this episode and others, please check out the Building Byte at www.buildwithproactive.com.
Welcome to the Building Byte podcast, a podcast for construction contractors, owners, and insurance professionals, where you'll hear from the experts about key topics that'll help you be successful. I'm Chris Epps, a senior director with Proactive, and I'm joined here with my co-host Mike Diercksen, our manager of marketing and business development. Our guest today, a true innovator and dynamic presenter, is Josh Levy, co-founder and CEO of Document Crunch. Josh, welcome to the show. How are you this afternoon?
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Chris and Michael. I'm great and delighted to be here with y'all.
Yep, we're stoked to have you on. And Mike, how about yourself? How are you?
Doing good, Chris. Really excited to have Josh on, and we've had some great conversations in the past. Really looking forward to this one.
Wonderful. Well, let's get to it. Before we jump into our main topic, Josh, I was hoping you could briefly share a little bit about yourself and maybe your journey to how you got to Document Crunch and came up with that idea and what led you to where you are today.
Yeah, I wish I could say that I had some super awesome tech background and I have this history of innovation, but at the end of the day, I'm just a construction guy who saw a problem in our industry and I'm trying to solve for it. So I went to the University of Florida, go Gators, was a construction management major, did some internships with some large contractors in the early 2000s where, I kind of worked out of those project trailers and put on a hard hat every day and going down that project management route. And I really decided, having done that I didn't want to do that. I really enjoyed the kind of bigger picture of the industry, but I just didn't love. I had a professor that used to say, to be in this industry, you've got to love the smell of sawdust and concrete. And that just wasn't me. I was much more interested in the business of construction than maybe some of the technical details with constructability, if you will. So anyway, that kind of led me down. Actually, I ended up working for a startup for a few years, but ended up going to law school at the University of Miami in my hometown and was primarily focused on construction law. When I got a job when I graduated I'd worked with two firms, and one of them was a big Miami-based firm that represented real estate developers who were handling construction litigation. But I then ultimately went back to the firm that I'd interned with while I was in law school, and the name of that firm was Picard and Abramson. I see you both nodding. I'm sure You both know them pretty well because you probably have worked with them plenty. So arguably, in my estimation, the preeminent construction law firm in the U.S. When I was clerking at the time, I clerked for a young partner there by the name of Adam Hanfinger in the Miami office. This is while I was in law school. And aside from having a very interesting last name, Adam is memorable because he, so many years later, is actually the co-founder of Document Crunch. He's not full-time. He still has his position at Picard, but he does sit on our board of directors. And, he was as much the brains behind this idea as I was. And so what happened was I was practicing with Adam in South Florida 8 years ago-ish. I left Adam and moved to Atlanta, Georgia, where I am today, because I went in-house with a really large ENR top 30 contractor in the U.S. and ended up, working in their Southeast footprint, which when I started was right around, I think, $400 or $500 million in revenue. And when I left, it was a little over $1 billion a year. And ultimately ended up, taking on a leadership role of that legal department in that business unit, and just was super overwhelmed with some of the contract workflows that I was being tasked with, and ended up actually hiring Adam and my old firm to help me with some of that overflow work. And that was the seed of this idea, which is Document Crunch. So anyway, that's kind of my backstory. And like I said, I wish I was some super awesome tech entrepreneur, but no, I was just a construction attorney and working in the business, and every single day just came to appreciate what a big problem our industry has with construction contracts and, all the different pain points associated with them. And just, once Adam and I started brainstorming, we started saying, this is crazy that we're still doing this the same way for the last 30, 40, 50 years. There's got to be a better way to amplify and democratize this expertise and really, kind of empower everybody in the industry to understand the things that we're being relied upon to understand every single day.
Yeah, and just a quick shout out, if anyone follows Document Crunch on social media and LinkedIn, I did see you guys had your first all team in person festival. So congratulations to that and getting Crunch Fest going.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought that up. It was, and especially since we're talking about the founding story and Adam and myself and kind of the pain that we saw, for us to be together at our first ever all company meeting, Crunch Fest 23 in Austin, Texas. We were actually hosted by Procore at their Austin headquarters. And we also had guest speakers from J.E. Dunn Construction, from Procore, from Zakua Ventures. And then we also had my co-founder, Adam, and actually we had a third co-founder who's not so much in the construction side, but Adam Nadler, he was very much involved in the formation of the business and helping us. He's an entrepreneur who had that general business sense when we all brought this idea from an idea that two crazy lawyers had to something that we were going to build a business around. But anyway, we had, great speakers and just kind of looking around with my two co-founders, the Adams, and seeing what this idea that we had 4.5 years ago has blossomed into. And really what I'm talking about is the business growth is awesome. And I'm very proud of it. And we've got great customers all over the country. But more importantly than that, the team of people that we've assembled is beyond anything that I could have ever imagined. So I appreciate you bringing it up because I'm still kind of reveling in just that. I posted about this on social. I'm awe-inspired by the team of human beings that are now behind Document Crunch. We call them the Crunchers. You're talking about the very best software engineers and product people that you could imagine who were behind a couple of really successful construction technology solutions over the past several years. So, and so we've got a bit of that going on, but then we've also paired them with a team of attorneys, including ex-customers, a team of great salespeople from behind a bunch of other products. And just to see this cross collaboration, it's not just working with lawyers and construction professionals anymore. It's actually funny. I pointed at Adam Hanfinger, lawyer, right? Picard and Amerson. I said, I'm used to working with you. And Chris Zaliga with J.E. Dunn, my former colleague who runs the Austin office there. I pointed at him and I said, I'm used to working with you. And then I looked at the 26 other Crunchers there and I said, I'm not really used to working with you all, but it's amazing to kind of have built a movement of people around this idea. And it was just really awesome for us to all be together.
Yeah, no, it sounds like a fantastic event. And, so with that, I'm really excited to get into our main topic today here, which is empowering everyone in our industry to understand what's in their contract. I know you alluded to it a little bit, but, Josh, take us back to 4 years ago. What was it about these contracts specifically that you're sitting there with these co-creators of Document Crunch going, there's got to be a better way?
Yeah, so let me start with my very individual self journey, or the journey that I was on as a blue chip lawyer at a blue chip construction company, and then I'll broaden it out because these were the dots that I literally was connecting. So there were two workflows in particular that were just driving me nuts. One, so think about it. My business unit almost or more than doubled in size during 2015 to 2020 when I was there. That means we were bidding a lot more jobs, right? The economy was picking up, we were expanding quite a bit. And this idea of having to provide comments on every bid, that was the commercial expectation. You needed internally to get comfortable that what we were bidding was something reasonable, and externally you're still in kind of sales mode, but you need to let the owner in a lot of cases know what issues you may have with the contract so that those can be considered as part of your bid. And usually in bidding scenarios, what are you? You're 1 in 3, 1 in 4, 1 in 5. And the idea that I was being used to look at every single one of these documents and have to do a risk memo on every one of these documents. By the way, and this is when my individual experience got married with my prior experience, I represented so many big contractors and the issues list is roughly the same across the board. So I had gotten overwhelmed to the point where I was now flipping things to outside counsel, but I also was looking around at the people around me and they were just flipping it to me, because they were scared of the contract. The contract was a little bit of a black box. They'd come accustomed to having big, bad functions like risk managers and legal helping support them. And at the end of the day, actually Chris with J.E. Dunn spoke at CrunchFest about this last week. You have this dynamic in the construction industry where you don't want people in the field having to over rely on people in the back office. You want people that are closest to the decisions to be able to make those decisions. So in the case of the negotiation bidding phase, that often meant that the best deals that we'd work on are deals where myself and the project executive were working in lockstep together. But in, I'd say 8 to 9 out of 10 cases, I was just getting something tossed over the fence at me by a business developer or that project executive. And they were saying, can you review this and just provide your comments? And then they would have to deal with it. And there was some tension in that process. And I was like, what if this was more collaborative? And similarly to that, while I was doing that, I just had a line of people outside my office every single day, project managers. Hey, something happened on the job site. What does our contract say? So after myself and the maybe collaborative, maybe not collaborative project executive would go and get the deal cooked and negotiate it, there was this transition to people that needed to administrate that in the field. And you all know this based on what you do. Have you all ever had a claim where the documentation was good? Ever?
Very few. It's a short list where it's not perfected. It's not. I would say it's atypical.
It's atypical, and my anecdotal experience after doing this for a decade was the project managers that were really on top of this stuff. They didn't ever have claims because they nip stuff in the butt at the project level. And whether it's a big claim or a little issue, when these people were pacing outside my office saying something happened on the job site, was our contract say? What I realized there, Chris, and I'm sure this will resonate with you. That means that they had an interaction at the project level that they weren't really sure of what to do about it. So rather than like winning the discussion at the project level and being all over it, like, hey, I know you say that contingency can't be used for this, but here it plainly says that it can. So here's your change order, sign it. Instead, they were coming back to me and saying, something happened at the project. What does our contract say? We were already 2 or 3 degrees off just by me now being involved and the person on the other side now doing the same thing, right? Now you're already, again, going back to what Chris Zaliga was saying at CrunchFest, now you already have removed people that are closest from the situation from the decision-making process. That's already bad. And to your point, what you were saying is what they were asking me about was awesome, but what quickly became apparent to me is what are all the things that I'm not even being engaged on?
Right.
That's where you come to learn about the claims. And so that was happening to me at JDUN. So here I was being like kind of looked at as like Siri for contracts during the negotiation and bidding phase, but then also at the project level. And I was like, something's got to give here. I mean, the people that I was working with, these people that are building these buildings are incredibly smart people. They have all the ability to understand this stuff a little better, but they're intimidated. They've become overly reliant on these external resources. Whatever it is, it's just added up to a bad culture around like, hey, grab it. RTFC. That's a pretty common refrain that you hear from executives. I don't know what rating we have here, so I won't be able to say it. I'll just say it stands for, any GC out there who's been in the business for a while knows what that means. It should be a nice bumper sticker. It says, read the freaking contract, right? But that doesn't happen with this generation, right? And there's a lot of reasons why. So anyway, at this big contractor, I observed that condition where people like me were being hired to essentially be like these oracles of contracts. And the information was not being democratized in a way that was efficient and or led to being proactive around managing your projects, which means that you nip issues in the butt, which means you don't have big claims, which means I don't get to then come and get a big pile of stuff and be like, we don't even have good paperwork to support your version of the story. Like, what the heck? Like, you're engaging me 9 months too late. If we just had that adult discussion in real time, we could have like really managed this. So that was happening to me. And then I got to think about in the billions of dollars of construction contracts that I've been involved in, all of the times that I've worked at the trade partner or an insurance broker for a trade partner or an architect or an engineer or a smaller contractor, all the times that I was sitting there across the table and I knew that we were more prepared and more sophisticated than they were, and they'd be poking and prodding me and saying, hey, we really want to talk about this issue. And I would just have this feeling like, hey, I'm not your lawyer, but I think you should actually pay attention to the other issue. I never could say that because I was the lawyer, but that's how I felt. And I thought about this informational disadvantage that the lion's share of our industry is at, which mirrors this exact same kind of dynamic I'm talking about with project managers and project executives, even at these bigger companies. And I think about an industry, and I love your all's thoughts on this too. I think about an industry where I'll tell you, software is a much better business than construction. Construction profits aren't exactly like going up over time. There's a lot of risk and stuff happens every single day. And who bears the costs for that stuff happening is all born in the contract. We're called contractors for crying out loud. And I think about the fact that there's so much inefficient now scheduling and pricing and unneeded litigation and unneeded claims and just bad experiences due to this fundamental lack of understanding around the contract, whether it's a PM at a big contractor or it's the VP of operations of a small contractor. It doesn't matter. Our industry has a problem. This lack of understanding, this lack of agency, this lack of ownership around contracts is costing our industry money every single day. Hey, it's raining outside. You had 3 days to give notice. You didn't give notice. The owner's holding retainage over you. You say, well, what about that rain delay, that rainy week in May? The owner says, I get it, but it said you had 3 days to give notice and you waived your claims. How about I give you 1 day of relief instead of 5? And they're holding the retainage. So you take 1 day and now you've ate 4 days. And we can be better. Our industry can be better. And it starts with understanding this stuff. And that is what is inspiring me every single day at Document Crunch. This concept that you would have to come into my office and have me do a page turn and explain to you what the words of this document said and what to do is nonsense. Our industry is smart and it can be better around this. And so what we're really inspired by when we talk about empowering, Michael, everybody in the industry to understand their contracts is exactly that. We believe that through the use of technology in this case, we are amplifying the ability for more people to do better work every day around contracts, which we believe will lead to more effective outcomes at the project level. We believe that it will lead to less risky and more balanced contracts being executed. We believe that will lead to better and more efficient pricing, scheduling, less claims, less litigation, and a better overall industry. And that is the future that we are aspiring to at Document Crunch every single day.
That is an impressive answer, Josh. It really is. And I think my favorite part that you mentioned was Siri for contracts. Like this instant, like, here's this Mr. Don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain. Like, let's ask a question, I'll get an answer. And I know you mentioned a scenario, right, about the delay and the retainage as far as the rain issues going, but we do find a lot of our audience gravitates to stories, right, to an anecdote, a situation that's happened. Can you give us an example of a way that Document Crunch was implemented and assisted with one of your clients?
Absolutely. I mean, I just was right before I got on this call, I actually just got a Slack message from my team. We have a new contractor in Idaho. And I think that the quote I just saw, sorry, I turned up my Slack, was that this electrical contractor in Idaho has shaved 70% of their time off reviewing contracts. And by the way, that's by a non-legal persona that's also saying they're sending a much lesser percentage of work out to consultants to now review because they're empowered to do it. I mean, you hear stories like that all the time. On our website, there's a lot of great use cases as well. The claims issue is a little bit of a squishier way to forecast because, it's preventative. Like, so it's like a seatbelt. You want to wear one, but you don't know what would have happened if you didn't wear one because you were wearing one. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But again, this goes back to Chris, what you were saying. I mean, I can't put an empirical number on it, but anecdotally, I know that PMs that are more that know what they're doing have less issues. I've seen that time and time again. And
Sure.
and we're hearing from companies all over the country that putting aside time savings, putting aside the efficiency gains, the idea that you can now educate and train your people, like that is worth its weight in gold for the reasons that I'm talking about. But that's just one example. I mean, we have another, just, again, on our website, you could see a lot of this stuff, but we're just hearing a lot about, I guess we're hearing a few different things. One would be that story that I just told you about the contractor in Idaho. Another one, we've got a contractor in Boston. They started with their chief legal was the one who procured us. He allowed his risk manager, who's not traditionally not a lawyer, to use Document Crunch. And I think their initial use case study, they were one of our early customers. Their initial use case study said that maybe 90% less work by the chief legal officer because the risk manager with project executives and Document Crunch were able to get to the right result. And so he was disengaging 90% of the time. The story that I'm much more excited about is after a couple of years of that, just this past fall, they unrolled this to every project executive at their company. Every project executive at their company is now using Document Crunch. So now you're further amplifying the impact of training and allowing people to do some of this work. I mean, it's not a secret. They've talked about this. Balfour Beatty, Texas and Arizona, every project executive is using Document Crunch, and their chief legal, I think in those divisions, I think his quote recently was he's spending 50% less times or an average of a couple hours on every project during the bidding and negotiation phase because the project executives are now using Document Crunch. And the byproduct of that for him, which he's spoken to publicly, is that he feels that his people are more prepared, and that's going to transfer to the execution phase of the project. So, the thing I think I'm most proud about, again, is this concept of empowering others. The efficiencies are awesome. All software is going to save you time. All software is going to save you money. To me, that's great. Not all, but good software. That's kind of table stakes. I'm much more interested in this story of empowerment and kind of this story of allowing folks and organizations to level up and not have to rely on these traditional resources as much. That's the stuff that we're really excited about.
Yeah, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, Josh. Anecdotally, having sat in that project manager, project exec position, the thing that really jumped off the page at me was, when you were talking about you may not be able to quantify it specifically, but the amount of issues that don't get kicked up to that next level to people who then have to be educated about those issues to then go argue over them for something that's usually relatively not that ambiguous. It's a lot of those points of contention that end up a change order somewhere anyway, get resolved down the line, but then you've involved 5, 6, 7 other people and involve their time, and it kind of can snowball very quickly. If the first 2 people talking about it, you can point back to the specs or the contracts and resolve those issues. That's a tremendous time savings, especially over time.
It's a tremendous time savings, and all you need is to keep one project on the rails that otherwise could have spun off the rails somewhere along the way of getting all these different stakeholders involved, and it's worth its weight in gold. And what I'll tell you, Chris, what you just described, I'll tell you where we're batting 1,000. Where we are batting 1,000 right now is when we get in the room with the executives at these companies, like in the C-suite, the decision makers, and we say, would you like your folks to be a little bit smarter around this stuff? And we're batting 1,000. The answer is, of course. Of course you do, because anybody who's been in these roles understands how this works. And anybody who's had one project go awry understands how this stuff works. And that is not where our industry makes money. That is not where our industry wants to be. And unfortunately, we've gone there way too many times now, and we can do better. Again, this is as much a challenge to the industry as it is about what we're doing at Document Crunch. My challenge to the industry is, damn it, we can be better around this. We are way too smart to not be doing a better job around this. And that's what we're super focused on here at Document Crunch.
And two, it seems like there's a lot of those almost trickle down type effects. I could see, having sat in the GC's seat, just relationship management with a repeat buyer, negotiated owner, just all of those things in addition to the time savings. What other benefits do you guys see downstream, some of those trickle down effects?
Yeah, the friction that comes from these dynamics is a big deal. So if someone can get you a contract, and one of our customers was talking about this, they used to have to engage legal and they'd get promised a 2-week turnaround. With Document Crunch, they're now able to do this in 45 minutes and turn comments back. That's the difference between maybe the owner talking to the next contractor or just, keeping the ball moving, keeping the negotiation going, whatever it is. So, that type of stuff's important. I think about, and I don't know if you all have had this, but the business developers in my office that are saying, why can't we sign this? They're going to go to the next bidder if we don't sign this. And they just lack that understanding where, of course, they would want to protect the company's interest. But now I've got that friction internally. Then you go externally and they're saying to you, you need to sign this or we're going to go to the next guy. Well, what if there wasn't a next guy? What if we had data to understand what was truly market? Now I'm getting to the future state, but that's where this is going. We have an official partnership with AXA XL, who I'm sure is a stakeholder that you all are around it with, with their sub-default insurance group. We're part of their tech ecosystem, but now we have a relationship with them where we're starting to provide benchmarking of their insurance contracts so that they're providing this as a value add to their insurers, which is to say, we can tell you what's now market. Your business developer is right. You're being pernickety over this.
Right.
Or business developer, chill out. The ability to use data to break down silos around contracting, use data to make decisions around contracting. It's a really powerful thing. And, we're just at the tip of the iceberg here in our industry. You think about macro trends of our industry, not being very digitized. Most of these contracts are sitting in bankers' boxes in some warehouse that I've had to dig through too many times in my career. don't wear nice shoes when you go to those storage facilities. I know you guys know what I'm talking
Done
about
that
as well.
quite a few times. Yes.
Yep. But anyway, so that's kind of how I'm thinking about this as well.
Well, and industry-wide seems to keep raising those table stakes with those improvements over time, and especially once you're working in like a tech ecosystem across, and you're starting to benchmark across a lot of contractors within that industry. It's that rising tide raising all ships, or you kind of get left behind if you're not part of that advancement.
Well, I agree, and I'll actually spin it to a little bit more like positive view of the world, because we're talking about maybe some big picture thoughts here, right? So the experience that I was just describing my own team with at the beginning of this podcast, right? The crunchers and how much they mean to me and how I'm awe-inspired. There's a service aspect to our industry. There's a lot of great GCs out there. There's a lot of great trade partners out there. There's a lot of great designers out there. And what are differentiators? Differentiators are how you make people feel when you work with them, and the ability to be efficient, to be reasonable, to be not confrontational, but substantive. These are differentiators. And I don't care if it's document crunch or another technology application. If you have the ability to raise your level of service and make people feel better working with you, that's a really, really big deal. And as great as my product is, I will tell you, even with that Idaho contractor I'm telling you, the other story that I saw now in my Slack is that he mentioned 6 times that he couldn't be more impressed with the team than the document crunch team. It's how you make people feel working with you. And my challenge to this industry is, what are you doing about leveraging technology to make people feel better about working with you? How can you eliminate those little friction points? How can you keep that information closest to the people who need to make decisions so they can make quick decisions, so we're not waiting for some guy in a suit in the back office to render an opinion without much basis because it's a company policy? I mean, that's nonsense, and we can be better as an industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's an excellent point. It's a common through line on the podcast, right? As much as we could talk about innovation, construction, these things that we've been doing, whether we've been doing it for a long time or a short amount of time, it comes down to the people, right? And how you make people feel and how you work with people and having the right people in those positions. But with that being said, Josh, I wonder, we've talked about a whole host of things. You've mentioned several different GCs that Document Crunch is employed with or working with, Is there a size? Is this like a one-size-fits-all type deal? Or how do you envision Document Crunch being able to roll out, whether it's a subcontractor, maybe on a smaller scale, or a grand GC, kind of like you mentioned, growing at such a large rate in the Southeast?
It's actually something that we're grappling with right now, because I don't know that we're exactly 50-50 anymore, but it's like, imagine a close election for 51-49, 52-48. We're split pretty down the middle between general contractors and trade partners right now. That's like 99% of our customer base. That's by design, because I come from that contractor's background. I do understand, however, that every stakeholder on every project every day needs this. So I'll just tell you a few other emerging cases. We call them emerging use cases. We had a major surety do a successful pilot with us last year, and now they're signing. I hope to have the contract finalized today, but we're having a contract, signing with them where they're going to now use us to inform underwriting decisions. I talked about the AXA XL use case for big data benchmarking. We're working with Electri, the research foundation for the National Electrical Contractors Association, similarly to the AXA arrangement, where we're starting to provide insights and data around this. We had a top 10 designer in the world do a pilot with us last year, and now they've opted into a much bigger agreement with us. Today, we were on the phone with a multinational supplier of electrical parts. They're strongly, looking into like using us as part of the procurement workflow. I think every stakeholder in the industry could benefit from contract intelligence, and that's really what our bigger mission is. And no, to answer your question, Michael, there's not. Right now, we are being used by, I don't know, 10 or 12 or 15 of the ENR top 50 or 75 contractors, but we're also being used by tiny landscapers in California. I would say once you get further down the value chain, like the folks hanging the shingles on the roof across the street from my house right now, and the guys who just finished remodeling my bathroom, I don't know that they would necessarily be crunchers, but I would say that generally speaking, a very large segment of the industry, especially in that commercial and industrial and, kind of the non like pure residential space could really benefit from us.
Yeah, it seems like there's probably a logical threshold there that you guys are figuring out. But I got to believe, Josh, it seems like the people maybe further down in those smaller, less sophisticated, longer established firms probably get the most benefit from your service offerings, as opposed to, you talk about like superior knowledge when you come to the table to negotiate a contract, and, large firm versus small firm, or large GC versus smaller local sub partners. But it seems like there's a lot of value for the people on maybe the smaller end of that spectrum.
You just nailed it, Chris. So, think about that for the larger companies that are using us. It's more about efficiencies, compliance, supporting workflows, training, education. These are the things that you're really zeroing in on. So I always say it's like giving those folks a calculator to do their work a little faster, which is good. But once you get down to the less sophisticated contractors, and again, still of a certain size, but maybe that don't have all those in-house like overhead functions that advise on all this stuff.
Specialty positions.
Right. Once you get down to those folks, this goes from a calculator to giving them a flashlight when they're in a cave. And it's less about the time savings, and it's more about, wow, I didn't even know what I should be looking for, let alone how fast I should be looking for it. Oh, wow, now I understand what a good contract could look like. And that the value proposition, you nailed it, is huge for them. And I always like to say the analogy there, the big companies are the project managers, because they're the folks that don't get to engage with those in-house resources all the time. They got to wait in line, and they only get to come in special circumstances, right? And similarly, I find that operators at project levels are getting really, really huge value from this as well.
I could see that. You're almost, to a certain degree, I think, I would say accelerating the contracts, the education of a lot of those project managers, in my mind. You spend 10 years in the industry learning those issues one at a time in a very one-off manner, and it seems like you guys are condensing that timetable and accelerating really that learning curve for people in that position, particularly with larger GCs. You get guys and ladies who've been on longer term projects that, you may be on one project 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and you're living by that one contract more than likely. And I think it brings a lot to the table in terms of just getting up that learning curve and repeatability of that process and relying on the contract.
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, that's exactly what we're trying to do. And it's about empowering everyone to understand what's in their contracts. And when we say everyone, we mean everyone. Like, there's no longer an excuse for, oh, I'm just an assistant project manager. Like, I don't really know. Well, no, you can now use a tool that gives you some superpowers that you didn't used to have. So go leverage it, go learn, and go be great and get to that next level, right? I mean, right. I don't know how much you all know, but I sometimes say this, and I don't know how much your experience has been with this, but I always say oftentimes the biggest difference between a PM and a PX is the PX took the time to understand like issues of risk management and contracts and can negotiate work. That to me is the big difference between a PM and a PX. So how are you going to accelerate that? How are you going to accelerate yourself in your career? I mean, these are some of the principles that are kind of right underneath the surface of what we talk about a lot of times at Document Crunch.
I've loved our conversation so far, and I think our audience is going to enjoy it and get a lot of benefit from it too. Especially, we'd love to direct them to your website at the end of things here. We also typically leave our audience with a couple of takeaways, 2 or 3 takeaways. And given our conversation today, what any prospective GCs or subcontractors listening in, what would you recommend as 3 takeaways for those guys to take some action coming out of our conversation today?
Yeah, that's awesome. Great question, by the way. So I think the 3 things that are coming to mind for me right now is, like, 1, the contract does not have to be a black box. It doesn't have to be a quagmire. Like, we can be better. We should have more agency. We should collaborate. We should empower our operators and folks to understand this stuff so that they can make better decisions, which ultimately protect our companies and our industry's bottom line. Kind of similarly to that, and I think about our big picture and what we're doing kind of in the insurance markets right now with XXL and the National Electrical Contractors Association. Stop putting your head in the sand. We can use data. We can use data to drive good decisions. We can use data to drive good decisions around contracts, and that's now. Tomorrow starts today. And I think the third, maybe more general challenge that's not really document crunch related goes to this topic of what we're talking about. Our industry has a major opportunity now. There's a proliferation of software and technology solutions that have the ability to really allow our industry to take a major leap forward. Are we going to allow ourselves to be left behind, or are we as leaders going to propel ourselves to a brighter future? If you're still listening to us at this point in the podcast, I think like notions of innovation and technology maybe resonate with you. What are we doing about it? What are we doing about it as an industry? Like, can we move our industry forward? Because I'm sick of these statistics. I'm sick of these studies that show that we're the second least digitized major industry out there, except for agriculture. It's enough already. Like, we can be better. Document crunch is one solution, but I've got now friends that have started some other fascinating tech solutions that are out there. The time is now for our industry. There is a changing of the guard, right? This isn't your daddy's construction company or construction industry anymore. The profile of our industry is changing, and we need to do, like, it's nice to talk about technology, but what are you really doing about it? All of you out there, what are you doing about it to model that type of leadership, to promote adoption, to bring our industry to a brighter place? And I think that's like my bigger like picture thought, that I don't know that I had that thought when I started Document Crunch. I was just worried about contracts and pain, but I certainly have it now as I get to go around and speak to so many people in our industry.
Yeah, those are excellent takeaways. And I guess following that up a little bit, so as that message resonates, right, you're maybe a GC or someone in the industry listening to this, what would be that first step then, right? If you're going, okay, yeah, I need to get more involved, I need to take ownership of this, where's my first step? Where do I look to first?
Yeah, so you're talking just generally about the adoption strategy. I mean, I think the idea is, and they're an amazing partner of ours, Procore, right? You cannot expect that companies like Document Crunch right out of the box today at 4.5 years into our journey are going to look like Procore. Procore has been around for over 20 years, and Procore says this. So I don't think maybe I'm stealing some of their thunder, but I've heard them say it enough, which is to say, it was their early partnerships with early adopters that allowed them to iterate, improve, and continue to deliver on the core value that they delivered upon. I'm just using them as an example because they're such a shining example of a successful startup company for our industry, frankly. So number one, like, be open-minded to solutions that are out there. Surely your company is much better than I do, and I'm sure whether it's contracts or something else, there's things out there that you probably know can be optimized through the use or leverage of technology. Be open-minded to that, and then be a partner. Be a partner to these software companies. Give them that feedback. Understand that this is a long-term partnership. Likely, if you're partnering with these folks early in their journey, you're getting better pricing, in exchange for you taking that plunge. You're getting the ability to shape the product. A lot of our early customers will tell you they literally feel like they're product creators of Document Crunch because they send us an email or schedule a Zoom call with us and give us feedback, and then they're like, oh my gosh, now in the product. I mean, and there's something that, I think the right type of person really enjoys that and feels like they were a part of the process. Right. Not unlike when we look at a building that we were a part of and we take pride in that. So don't just be open-minded, but be a partner and understand that this is a journey. This doesn't happen overnight. It's hard. It's hard to start these companies. It's hard to put these solutions together. I'm super proud of where our product is today. And I know that tomorrow it's going to be 10 times better than it is today. And I know that yesterday it was 10 times worse than it is today. And those early partners have been critical for us. And I would just encourage you, if you're still listening, you've got something in you that's open to this. Think of it as a true partnership. Think of it as an opportunity to be involved in the long run. And if you take that challenge, I think ultimately you'll have the ability to get that much more value out of it, because you'll actually have some agency in shaping the arc of the product or the solution that you're engaging with.
A great action item. Well, Josh, this has been a fantastic conversation, definitely very educational. Before we let you go and wrap this up, we do have a few quick rapid-fire questions for you. So I'll shoot off the first one. What makes you the most energized about your work today with Document Crunch?
Oh, that answer changes, it feels like, periodically, but I would say that the mission that we're on is what really energizes me. But second to that, what has continued to evolve is seeing the customer's reaction to the value that we're delivering is incredible. And it is a responsibility that I apply extreme urgency to. to get feedback like that contractor in Idaho that we're talking about, which again, it was just coming through as I was signing on, so I didn't even have a chance to fully engage in it. But to get that type of feedback and to know that we're making a difference in the industry, that's incredibly powerful. And then finally, again, like I could not have ever envisioned this. I'm going to just bring it right back to the beginning of this podcast. The team of crunchers that's behind this, they are waking up every day, an incredible, talented group of people putting 150% into solving this industry's problems. It's an amazing group of people. And again, I feel extremely proud, but also really energized by the fact that this movement is growing and snowballing with the people. So it's really, I think at the end of the day, what did I talk about? I talked about the problem, but then I talked about our customers and our team. I think at the end of the day, if I could put a bow on that, Michael, it's the people that are a part of this movement that are the most energizing to me. At the end of the day, I'm all about the relationships. And I just could never have imagined that this would have turned into what it's turning into. And it's all because of the people that are behind this. That's our customers, that's our investors, that's our team. It's the people. And, in a lot of ways, that's kind of what I think probably inspired Adam and I. I mean, I was his law clerk for crying out loud, however many years ago now. Look how long we've been in each other's lives. Like this is a movement that's 15 years in the making, and we're continuing now to bring people in around us and to see these people grow around us and get value for their own lives out of this. I think that's probably the most energizing aspect of this.
On the other end and kind of the problem solving end of the scale, Josh, you said something very profound earlier, which was you said we're contractors, we're called contractors, and then then later on you said as an industry, we're like second largest industry that's the least digitized for an entire industry that relies on contracts. Which you marry those two concepts together, it really is. It's mind blowing and not something I immediately jump to. Why do you think that is? And why have firms maybe been slower to or struggling with tech adoption? Not maybe just with contracts, but just in general. What have you seen kind of firsthand that's caused some of the tail dragging there for an industry that you would think you're right, we can do better. Why aren't we doing better?
We probably need a whole other podcast for this, and there are people there are people that have been in the game much longer than me that probably have really interesting insights. I don't know that I have a great answer. I can talk about how I think contracts have become a problem during this phase. Like I believe that the industry has become a lot more complex in the last 15 years with project delivery types, with the idea that you don't get to mail letters and fax letters anymore. You constantly got emails and text messages and correspondences, and project teams are just overwhelmed and can't really dig in to some of the documentation that like maybe did in yesteryear. But I don't know that I truly understand. I wish I had a profound answer to this. I do not know that I truly understand why our industry has lagged behind. I do know that our means and methods in a lot of cases have stayed consistent for many years. Like I think the famous analogy that people give is they laid bricks when they were building the pyramids with the same methodologies that they do today. I'm not exactly sure why tech adoption has lagged behind it, but here's what I also know. I don't know that historically there has been a ton of great tech purpose built for our industry.
Oh, 100%.
And so I do believe, and that is the era that I'm talking about. So, but that excuse no longer exists because now there is a lot of tech that is purpose built for our industry. But I believe that probably if you looked at it's not just an industry issue, it's a software or tech arc issue as well, which is to say that these applications were not being purpose built for construction in this golden era of technology that we've experienced in the world. And I think that that's now changed. And there's been plenty of recognition and thesis. I talked about Procore. Procore is kind of the shining example. Like this is an industry that's worth building for. This is an industry that's worth investing in. This is an industry that can use the help. And I do believe that now you're starting to see some real talent being pointed in this direction. Now, the flip side to that is, and what's caused a little bit of a recent hiccup in adoption, maybe to answer your question, has been, so great, now all these software engineers with zero construction background are now saying, wow, this is a big industry that's ripe for disruption, but they haven't been on a job site and they don't really understand what's going on, or they don't understand the problem. They invite, so what happened probably 10 years ago or so, is you had a bunch of shiny applications that came out that didn't really substantively solve real pain points. But now, I mean, my story is one I think that resonates. Early on, it was like, well, these guys don't really have a fancy product, but damn, do they understand what they're solving for? And damn, does this thing do what they say it does? I mean, now the product gets to get shinier now that we've grown. But I think you are seeing a little bit more of these industry vets that are now starting to marry up with technology, and that's why I believe that this is really probably the time now.
Yeah. Well, excellent points, Josh. This has been such an awesome conversation. One thing we like to ask everyone before we let them go, this is the Building Byte podcast. That's building insurance technology with the experts like yourself. And we'd like to ask, what are you taking a bite out of today? Is there a local favorite down in Atlanta? Maybe it's back in Florida. I mean, I know the Varsity's got the record for the most hamburgers in the world or something like that.
So I'm in the burbs of Atlanta, and so if you're ever up in the Marietta area where I live right now, there's a spot called Tycoon Sushi and Thai in Marietta Square, and it is just a fantastic sushi Thai fusion place. I could give you a lot of Atlanta's got great restaurants, but you asked what I have the hankering for, and that's what's on my mind right now. It is getting close to dinner time over here, so maybe I'll have to hit it up. But that's a fantastic restaurant out in the burbs here in Atlanta.
Josh, as an Atlanta guy, you're gonna have to give me directions from the Big Chicken. Otherwise, I'm not gonna know how to get there. We gotta ground me a little bit.
It's not far from the Big Chicken. In fact, it's probably only about 7 minutes from the Big Chicken.
Perfect. Well, Josh, thank you again. Appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today. If our listeners want to hook up with you afterwards, LinkedIn, website, email, where can they find you? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, all of the above. I mean, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, Josh Levy, Document Crunch. You can find me pretty soon. Feel free to connect, engage, ask questions, or you can go to our website, which is www.documentcrunch.com. Feel free to connect with us there. Let us know what's on your mind. We really are here to help. So any questions you have, any follow-up you have, we want to be here. We've got an amazing team of industry solutions folks, actually led by one of our former customers, who was the associate general counsel of a major contractor, who's now kind of leading this industry solutions team for us. So, we're here. We want to help, and anything we can do to help, we will.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again for your time. We look forward to seeing you soon at a conference down in Florida. And beyond that, look forward to maybe having you back again to maybe have that follow-on discussion, see how Document Crunch is doing a little bit further down the road.
Awesome. I really enjoyed it, guys. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks again.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you for listening to The Building Byte. This podcast has been brought to you by Proactive. Check us out on thebuildingbyte.com, where you can subscribe to our newsletter and follow us on social media for all future The Building Byte news and updates. You can also find us on your favorite apps, including Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, and Amazon. If you have ideas for episode topics that we should cover on the show, or you know somebody who would be a perfect guest, let us know at connect@thebuildingbyte.com.